the previous videos, we have mentioned about the challenges of technical reading. You will need to read through a lot of publications, understand them, and putting the pieces together in order to gain a bigger pictures of the subjects that you are studying. There will be quite a number of publications within the field of study. These literatures are fragmented, which may or may not be directly interrelated. Some even do not provide guidance or explanations regarding their interrelationship. It will be purely dependent on your interpretations and your understanding. Some more, the technical writings are normally written in a very concise manner, detailed and full with specifications. There are a lot of technical jargons, and the authors normally expect you to have some prior understanding of the subject being discussed. Some even write the sentences in the complex form, which make it to be more challenging to understand. That will be quite time consuming for you to read words by words, sentence by sentence, in order to fully understand the topic being discussed by the author. Out of these challenges, most of the students will find technical reading to be quite boring and discouraging. At least this is how I feel when I started. The good news is, this kind of technical writings are normally well structured and normally follow a certain sequence in terms of the structure. This will be helpful for you to quickly grasp the important points out of the respective paper in minimum time. In these videos, we're going to discuss a bit a technique of technical reading where you can quickly grasp whichever you need from a technical writings. There are two things that you need to know. First, you don't have to read every single word in the article. Second, you only need to read words by words in detail when it is necessary. I would say that is the gist of technical reading technique that I am about to introduce. The purpose here is to ensure you can get the most important point in the minimum time, since you have to read through a lot of relevant papers. Let's say now you first encounter a paper which you have never read before, where you are in the stage of not knowing whether the articles is relevant to your study, or is it going to be impactful to your study, and etc. Therefore, your initial stage of reading will have the motive of filtering those which is relevant and significant. In such case, you don't have to read every single word. It is like a filtering process until you are sure it is relevant to your study. Then your second stage here, it will be quickly get a bigger pictures of the content of the paper. This is to prepare you so that later when you want to study it detail, words by words, you have some prior knowledge and a bigger pictures of the topics that the author is discussing. Only the last step here is when you find these papers is significantly relevant to your study, and you will need to study it in detail. Only then you will study it words by words carefully. So let me repeat again. The technical readings consist of three main stages. The first stage is for you to decide whether it is relevant or impactful to your study. If you find it irrelevant or not really contributing to your study, you will not proceed to the next stage. Once you decided it is relevant to your study, now you would like to know the content of the papers in a more detailed manner. Before you start that, you will need to first grab a bigger pictures of the entire topics being discussed by the author. Therefore, you will need to quickly browse through the papers to get some initial ideas before you go for detailed readings. The browsing through part, it will be the stage 2, and the detailed readings will be the stage 3. So now, how do we translate this into your reading technique? Or more precisely, we are talking about the reading sequence. Most of the students, they have a misconception. When they are told to read a technical paper, they will have to read from the first word to the last word of the paper. I'm not saying that this is wrong, but I found there is another more effective way for you to quickly acquire the information from the paper. It also saved me a lot of time on those papers which is actually not relevant to my research study. The slide here shows the typical flow of a technical reading. First, you will look at the titles and the keywords. Normally, this kind of technical articles, the titles are carefully constructed. It gives you information regarding the topic as well as the focus of the study. Some even give you more information such as the methodology of the study or the findings of the papers. Also, there is a list of the keywords which is normally within 5 words. These keywords are normally listed after the abstract, and those keywords give you some ideas of the focus of the study, and based on the titles and the keywords, you can more or less tell whether the papers is relevant to yours. You might not be confidently decide whether the papers is relevant to you, but when you encounter the papers which is irrelevant to your study, you are pretty sure about that. This at least help you to filter those which confirm irrelevant to your study. Next, you will go to read the abstract. There is a purpose. Normally, they have the abstract put on top of the papers in the first page, normally immediately after the titles and the authors. This is because the abstract gives you an overview of the content of the papers. They put everything in a short paragraph, somewhere between 100 to 300 words, depending on the publishers. The most common that you encounter, normally somewhere between 100 to 200 words. You only need a short time to read through these 100 to 200 words. It covers nearly the entire papers, starting from the problems or the rationale of the study, their methodology, their result and findings, and also their significant contributions. A well-constructed abstract will give you a good overview of the papers. From there, you will be able to determine whether the scope of the study is relevant to you, and also to observe their finding, whether it is significant. If you still cannot decide whether it is relevant to your study, or you would like to gain more ideas about the papers, you may go straight to the conclusion. This is the sections where normally they will highlight their contributions and the main findings of their study. The conclusion drawn will highlight to you all the significant findings that they have acquired from the respective study. And these conclusions are purely their things. Normally they don't put other people's works in their conclusions. Sometimes you will find yourself lost reading a paper, not knowing what are the important points and the findings. Conclusions will help you to highlight those. I would say that when you are doing the literature review, the conclusion part will be the part that you must read, and normally you will realize that the contributions given by the authors are normally listed in the conclusions. And when you discuss the topic, citing the respective authors, outlining their findings, most of them will come from the conclusions. This first 3 steps here, it will be considered as the stage 1, where your ultimate goal here is for you to filter those which is irrelevant, and those which is irrelevant, you will put them aside and proceed for the following stage for the relevant papers. Now your next stage here is to prepare yourself to have a better understanding of the papers. Therefore, you can quickly browse through the figures, tables, and their respective captions. Look at the tables. What are the parameters? What is it trying to demonstrate? And you can get the ideas from the captions. Same goes to the figures. During this process, you might want to look at all the main and subtitles for you to get an idea what are the focus of the study. Then you may start with the introductions. The introduction gives you the general background informations. The authors will tell you the purpose of their study and briefly introduce you regarding the state of the art. That means the authors will help you to establish the prior knowledge regarding the topic, the problems related to the topic that they are studying, which is the problem statements, as well as the rationale of the study, why this study is important, are normally given in the introduction. It also gives you a brief idea what this paper is about and what you can expect from this paper to prepare you with the following sections. Next, you can go straight to the result and discussions, where you start to look for their findings and justifications. What do they found? Why it is like this? What are the principles behind certain observations? What is the implications of certain response? There will be a lot of useful information here and technical insights. If you find yourself lost reading the result and discussions, you can always cross-check with the section for the conclusion. Normally they are in line, only that the result and discussions give you more detailed explanations and discussions. Next, if it is necessary, I will proceed with the methodology. You look into the experimental setup of the modeling and even the research design. They should give you sufficient details for you to be able to replicate their study. In fact, the sequence of the technical reading here, starting from result, discussions, methodology, and data analysis, the sequence can be interchanged depending on your need. Personally, I will put the result and discussions first, as I want myself to quickly acquire the significant findings of the relevant study. I shall only look into the methodology and data analysis when I really need to replicate their studies, or when I at the stage of developing the methodology for my own research. These two sections give you details how do you do the experiment or the modeling, what are the data that they acquire, how do they interpret the data, how do they process the data to get the results, what are the analysis procedures, how do they cross-check or verify their results, and all those. There is also a lot of technical inputs here, especially when you need to do a similar research as given in the articles. Bear in mind that this is the suggested sequence when you do the technical reading. Different people may have different ways of doing the reading. Personally, I find it to be quite effective and it saves me a lot of time. And also, the process here can be quite flexible, which may stop at any stages depending on your purposes and your needs. More specifically, for the papers which is irrelevant, you might stop here, or you might stop until abstract, or even you might stop at the conclusion. As for some papers which seems to be relevant, but when you understand more, you realize that you might not be able to use it, probably because the focus is different or the methodologies is different. You can only tell when you have a bigger pictures of the entire study, and you might stop any stages between the conclusions, figures, and the introductions. Then when you realize that the relevant papers is very significant to your study, you would like to know more about it, and you find that you need to read every single word out of the paper, especially their findings going to give you significant technical insights. Then you will need to look into details on the result and discussions. Then some more, when you realize that your research is nearly totally identical to them, at least in terms of the research design and methodology, which you need to get an idea how to realize the research program, and you are in the process trying to replicate the relevant study, then you might want to look into their methodology and how they process the data. Also, sometimes you will find yourself reading different sections of the papers at different stages of the research. When you are in the process of doing the literature review, your interest might be more at the conclusions as well as the result and discussions. These probably the sections that you're going to pay more emphasis. Then when you start to do the experiments, or when you are in the middle of carrying out the research, you will refer more extensively on the methodology and data and analysis. And then when you go back to the conclusions and the findings, you are probably in the stage of doing the discussions for your own research. Whatever it is, it goes back to the two main points that I mentioned earlier. You don't have to read every single words in the paper, and you only need to read every single words of the paper when it is necessary. There is one more thing that I need to emphasize. The sequence of reading here is not as rigid as you think. I will not say that you must follow this sequence in order for you to do a good research. What is important is the rationale behind this sequence. Normally, there is a purpose for you to do this kind of reading. You will have to take the leads and be clear of the purpose of the reading, so that you are not passively being guided by the respective paper, and then at the end of the day, different papers lead you to different places, and you find yourself confused and lost. You must be clear what you want to do, what do you need in order to achieve that. Then you start searching for the answers through the technical reading. That is the whole fundamentals of this technical reading.